So, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of About ADHD and Other Things. Joining me today is Kathy Edwards. Based in Arlington, Texas, Kathy is the founder and CEO of Reimagining Education. She has over 30 years of professional experience in the fields of education, beginning as a classroom teacher, followed by positions in administration, including as a school principal, and later as the founder of a specialized school. As a fierce advocate of academically and emotionally challenged children, Kathy partners with parents, teachers, and schools to identify solutions to classroom challenges. Kathy is a master diagnostician, offering comprehensive evaluations and assessments to parents and schools. In addition, she offers coaching for women, couples, individuals, and group coaching opportunities. Welcome, Kathy.
Hi, it's
How are
good to be.
you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Wonderful. I'm so happy to have you because we have been talking about this for a while, getting together and just having a chat. So, for just a little bit of background, I met Kathy almost 2 years ago when we participated in a coaching program. And she was just instrumental in helping me um, deal with some things that I needed to deal with as far as my son's school. And her compassion, the wealth of knowledge that she has, and I just want everybody to know about Kathy Edwards
Thank you.
and what
Thank
she
you
does.
for those words.
So, Kathy, your business is called Reimagining Education, right? So, in its title, it suggests that something's not quite right about our current system for education, and it needs reimagining. So tell me about that. How did you come up with that name, and how do you imagine education?
So that's a fantastic question. It goes back to frankly, the beginning of my career when my first degree, my bachelor's is in special education, birth to age 21, and secondary health education. And as I was going through school and learning how to work with students, struggling students, it wasn't making sense to me. The strategies that we were taught to use, the things that we were taught to use, they didn't make sense. And when I would question them, I was just told that was best practice. And
And what
so
can we tell me what year are we?
this would have been the early 80s,
Okay.
82, 83. And then when I graduated, I started as a high school teacher, high school special education teacher.
In
Um,
Texas.
in Texas, yes. And from day one, I realized that wait a minute, this makes no sense because in the profession, in the field of education, there are just certain things that we believe, and one of those core beliefs is that if children aren't we between kindergarten and the end of third grade, we teach children the basic math skills, reading, writing skills, and if they're not on grade level with those skills, then they never will be. And here's what actually happens because for children who struggle from third grade on, we began using compensatory strategies, making things easier. And there's this belief in the profession, especially the field of special education, if we make children feel good about themselves, they'll that's better. It's better, and it's better for anyone. You feel good about yourself, that's better. But here's the thing: what we do in our schools is we're creating artificial success, not genuine success. Artificial success is the child. Let's say we have a child whose reading level is 2, 3 years below grade level, but they're coming home with A's. They're coming home with high grades. And when you take a look at it, what's happening is, and a lot of parents don't understand this, your child isn't receiving on grade level instruction. That's there. And what most teachers do, because they don't know any other way to do it, is you minimize the expectation. If and it's easiest to explain, I think, with math. So if math teachers is teaching a lesson, and then let's say there are 15 problems to be completed independently. Well, the child who struggles might be told, you know what, just do half, just do every other one. And I often, in evaluations, when I look at other people's evaluations, one of the first go-tos there are standard go-tos: minimize, short assignments, extra time, proximity seating are the the main
But we're
tool.
not teaching them to read
No,
or to
because
do
here's
or to be. I mean, they are, but the expectation is now lower. So they're math and reading. They're not actually learning what the other kids are learning.
right. Because if you think about human beings, the only way we get better at anything is with practice. And so, how does it make sense that we take the child who struggles, the learner that struggles, and we have them do less? That doesn't work. That's
No,
not
it
how
doesn't.
we learn. What needs to happen, and parents don't like to hear this, the child actually has to do more, not less. And I often tell families that I've worked with so many families, and I say, here's the thing: you pay now or you pay later. And I don't necessarily mean with money. It's hard. It is
Hmm.
hard to dig in and do the work. If you do it, though, it increases the odds that your child will lead
Hmm.
a full, independent life. But our schools aren't structured for that to happen.
Right. So tell me how you reimagine.
The reimagining piece came about when I had an opportunity. I've been working in public schools, and I had the opportunity to run a private school. In Fort Worth, Texas, there's a place called the Child Study Center. It's an amazing facility with physicians and clinicians, and
The Center for what?
the Child Study Center in Fort
Child
Worth, Texas.
Study Center. And is this still exist?
It's there.
Okay.
It's amazing. So I was hired to run the class, to run their school. And the second day that I was there, this was a school full of children between the ages of 3 and 12. The second day that I was in there, I was walking down a hallway, and I realized I was hearing something I'd never heard in the schools I'd worked in before. The children were smiling, they were laughing, and it was the strangest thing because it struck me, and I realized, wait a minute, I haven't been around children who struggle that are happy like this. And I started really looking at that. It was my first opportunity to start experimenting. During those years, that would have been the late 80s, moving into the early 90s. And in Texas, the belief, and this is still true across our country, the belief is that when children have cognitive ability in low to below average ranges, not very low, but below average ranges, and their academic skills fall in the same range, the belief is that's the best they can do. And what we used to say in Texas was they're pedaling as fast as they can. They won't be able to increase skill set. So I started experimenting with, okay, because, it didn't make sense. And so what I discovered is that a child with lower cognitive ability will make progress. The difference is methodology and the length of time that it takes. So it's frequency and duration and
Mhm.
methodology. And when I started playing with that, I realized that this works. This actually works. And so reimagining, as time went on, what reimagining turned into was taking a look at a core belief that I hold. And my belief and what I teach everyone I work with is regardless of your diagnosis, the world doesn't care. It doesn't matter.
Mm-mm.
I'm a woman with ADHD. I have working memory deficits, and I have dysgraphia. The world doesn't care.
No,
It
it
does.
doesn't.
I couldn't do what I do and have done what I've done. I can't go to work and say, you know what, I happen to have ADHD and I have time blindness. So I'm probably not going to get here on time, like most of the time. And, when it comes to projects, I have dysgraphia, and I'm going to need more time. So yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not how the world works. We
No.
have to prepare students for the world as they find it, when they find it, and where they find themselves. And boy, has that, with the pandemic, that just brought all of this full
Yeah.
circle for me. So reimagining means throwing out the window the things we're taught. And so, first of all, we are told that if a child has ADHD or children with learning disabilities, you have to minimize distractions. And so classrooms are very bare. You have to minimize distractions, but they're not growing up in a distraction free world.
Yeah, that's
I
true,
believe
especially today with our electronics. But
we're not. So my school, any place that I am is filled with color. It's filled with things. It's filled with color. Everything that's not supposed to work works beautifully because I've always used it to teach. What do? You're sitting in a classroom. You are losing focus. Well, you can be taught how to, like, I can see behind me in my office, I can see the stars. Well, I can, and I do it all the time. I'll glance at a star and then immediately bring myself back. I use the environment to teach you how to manage yourself in the environment.
So, Kathy, so what strikes me is that uh, one of the things that I think parents and a lot of people worry about when their child does have a diagnosis or when they are flagged as somebody who may be needing some help, a lot of people don't want their child to go into that special education environment because they're afraid that this is the start of limiting them and them thinking that they don't have to meet the same standards as others, right? That they can meet this other standard. So a lot of parents, I think, tend to push back, and society in general says, if you know that you have this diagnosis, they're afraid that you're going to start having a limiting belief about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I will speak to that. So that's complicated. It's the the purpose of special education support is to meet the children where they are and then remediate skill deficit, help them and bring them forward. That's not quite how it works unless you know how to get that to work. And so the caution is that, and the question that a parent has to be continually asking the school is, at what cost? At what cost is this support being provided to my child? And what is the actual support? Because here's the other piece of this. Um, it's so important to know that as a special educator, special educators, we're taught to understand disabilities and disorders and to teach in certain ways, to excuse a lot of things. And so what often happens is that, well, and the truth is, there really isn't measurable growth beyond. In my career, 35 years now, I rarely, if ever, see a child who enters special education with let's say, a reading disability, reading comprehension disability. They come in around third, fourth grade with below grade level skills. The skills
Hmm.
never, and never is a strong word, increase. They don't move forward. And it's because if you can accurately predict all of this. So if there's a child in a school, any child in a school with average to above average cognitive ability and nothing else getting away, no emotional difficulties or home difficulties, nothing else gets in the way, there should be measurable growth equal to instruction. So if there's a 7-month school year, there should be 7 months of measurable growth at least, not less, but at least. If cognitive ability is lower, then the growth doesn't occur as quickly. So let's say child has a low average cognitive ability. They may gain 5 months in a 7-month school year. Over the course of the summer, though, a long break, in education is called regression and recoupment.
Hmm.
Over the course of a long break, all students are expected to lose a little bit. But you take the child with identified with a diagnosis, with a disability or disorder. So if that child, let's say that the child's in the 5th grade and their reading level is 3rd grade, 5th month, and if you've got excellent teachers and an excellent program, they might be able to get that child up by the end of the school year to maybe 4th grade. Over the course of the summer, with a low average cognitive ability, they're going to lose at least 2 grading periods worth of instruction. So you brought them forward 5 months. They lose 3 to 4 months over the course of the summer. So now you're almost back at the beginning again. And that happens one year after another.
Yeah.
What parents can do to sort of take care of that, what a parent can do is, and there are ways to do it, to assess for growth over time. And there are ways, I teach families all the time how to work with a school so that you are getting accurate, valid assessment information at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the year.
Hmm.
There's growth over time. And then this is the parent part that they don't necessarily like, is it's as simple as If you have a child, if the disorder is in reading, if it's in reading, it's also going to be in writing. And so it's as simple as having, I call it a home program. If you've got a 7 month, a 7 week break over the course of the summer, if you'll spend 60 to about 75 minutes with the child, reading and writing 5 out of 7 days, there's no loss. It's
Hmm.
a, it's you can do that, but that's not what we tend to do. And so for families, I'm looking at all of this, the identification, the label, the meeting special education eligibility, and the label actually can buy you far more than it doesn't. And by that I mean things that will help the child when it's time for post-secondary education and different things. At the same time, to your point, initially, it can be limiting almost always, almost all the time. It is, unless as a parent, you know how to be on top of that
Hmm.
to ensure that that doesn't happen for your child. And so, in simple terms, I tell families, and when I work as an advocate with families, I tell them, we're going to get the best possible program within the school, given the realities of the situation in the school, and you're going to have to supplement.
Yes.
Outside that school day, you're going to have to supplement if you want to maximize potential.
Hmm.
Because the other piece to realize is in special education in our country, there's federal law that mandates we do this. We provide free, appropriate public education, but there's not funding to help schools do that. The other piece is there's nothing that requires growth. The only thing that schools have to ensure is that there's no significant loss of skills.
Hmm.
So it's
Right.
just it's there's a lot to it, and so
That's a very frustrating thing
it is
because
frustrating.
depending on the situation, but it can almost feel like it's a, they're going to this place for X number of hours. You're going to work for X number of hours. And then you're telling me, when we come together to look at the child's growth, um, and the parent can say, well, this is what we're doing and this is what you're doing. But nonetheless, the child is not making significant growth, and they don't have to prove that. It's not even the purpose.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, it is possible though. It's possible to get your child what they need within public schools if you know how to do it. If you know
Mhm.
what to do. And the whole thing here, this is not I'm not bashing schools or teachers or anything. The system. And then when you asked me about reimagining education, it's the system.
Mhm.
It's one of the things I heard with my school, the school that I created, before the pandemic, we had thousands of educators, people that came through
I
to
just want to
learn.
pause for a second there because Kathy is talking about her Novus Academy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So we have to do a proper introduction to Novus, right? So the
Yeah.
Novus Academy was Kathy Edwards' a school that she had founded. And please continue. What did
Yeah.
it
Yes.
do?
Yeah. So the premise there was, so I founded a nonprofit. What if we could? And what if we could? The mission of what if we could was, what if we could change education for every child in our country without regard to anything, ability, socioeconomic status? What if we could do that? And so I created a school to prove that we could do that. And and then it was important to me to share this with as many educators as possible so that they would take it back to their schools. And that's what was happening. And the thing that I was told constantly, keep in mind, this was a school by definition for students with learning differences. And I, when the classrooms were created, I mirrored public school classrooms, a regular public school classroom, as much as possible with the types of students to show this can be done with anyone. And again and again and again, what I would be told is, this is what every child needs. This is the school that every child needs. And so we created this amazing thing. And I would often tell people, and to this day, I tell people, it's it can happen in every school in our country, and it doesn't cost a boatload of money. It does require a mindset shift. It does
Big
require
time.
rethinking, reimagining what education can be. Um, but that's what I was up to. That was the work I was up to.
Kathy, I just want to shift a little bit because I feel like I just dove right in to the piece that's always percolating in my mind. But in close to 35 years of being in this profession, you've had a chance to hold a variety of roles. You mentioned being a teacher. Um, what have been some of your takeaways as it pertains to what works and what doesn't work when it comes to helping our most vulnerable children? You talked a little bit about it with Novus and how, but what made that so great? What made that experiment a success?
Yeah. So it's rooted in a couple things, and the first is when I sit in meetings, and now to this day, I sit in these meetings, and I'm hearing people talking about all of the things that the child's not able to do, this, that, and the other, and as a school, we can't do this, we can't do that. My entire lifetime has been filled with in those situations with, yeah, but what if we could? What I hear what you're saying, but what if we could do this or that? What if we shifted this? What if we thought about this differently? The other thing has always had to come up in these situations is I've had to be the voice that says, "Hold on, just a minute here. If he could, he would. If
Oh,
she could,
yes, and
she
that's a
would."
big thing.
The behaviors, the things that you're seeing the child present, the fact that they're not doing the work or they're not coming to school or those sorts of things, it always comes back to why. If they could, they'd be doing it. I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning, opens their eyes, and says, "I hope my day sucks." Children don't wake up and think, "I hope I go to school today," and nope, everybody makes fun of me. I fail everything I do.
Hmm.
It does that.
Yeah.
At the same time, millions of children in our country wake up and walk into schools day after
Yep.
day after day and experience those things until they don't.
The amazing thing is that we know this. They get tired of feeling like they're not being able to do the work or to meet the expectation, and they end up not wanting to go to school, and all kinds of things happen. And then society says, or the teacher schools say, well, the problem is the child. What? The child, because they're looking at the behavior and they're saying, oh, that kid just doesn't want to go to school. Well,
Yeah,
maybe they're not happy in their environment, and thinking about having to go to that place every single day and they don't have a choice. You expect them to do what?
yeah,
It's to do nothing and to
exactly.
just go to school happily, even though they are 100% miserable.
Yeah, and as adults, I mean, if imagine that occurring in the workplace.
You would leave.
You
You
leave.
would you would find a new employer,
Yep.
right?
Yeah,
We have that ability to say, okay, this isn't working for me, I can go someplace else. But our children don't.
yeah, but they don't. And so one of the ways to, because education is a system, schools are systems,
Hmm.
and when I go into a school, when I'm working with a school and meeting with people, what I'm always saying at the beginning of the conversation is, you know what? Let's forget the usual suspects. Let's not. It's what's supposed to be happening if your child is receiving special ed support and you're going to those IEP meetings, or in Texas we call them ARD meetings. um, the way that all this is supposed to be working is that a group of people come together on behalf of the child, looking at what do they need, what supports do they need, what do they need, before you ever figure out, before anyone even says what classroom this is going to occur in, where it's going to happen. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we've got the system, the school has classroom A, classroom B, classroom C, and so the child has to fit into those situations. And what I'm saying, and what I did with my school, was completely did away with that. We placed students based on instructional level and the methodology they needed, not because you're a certain age, you're in a certain grade, sort of
Hmm.
thing. Works beautifully, requires a mind shift in educators and education. But when I'm an advocate, it's schools, they don't ever get away with, well, we only have this classroom, whatever. But that's when the conversation goes to, I'm not an adversarial advocate. I'm not. Schools hate advocates,
I
hate
know.
them. And most advocates are adversarial. You've had the experience with me. Most are adversarial, they're aggressive. That's not me. I
Yeah.
know what it's to sit at every seat at the table as a parent, as a person with difficulties. I've had every position in schools. to say, okay, given the reality of your situation in this school, well, what might work here?
Right.
Let's just, because there's always a way. There's always a way to figure it out when you think of it that way. And so that's how I've been able to make the impact I make, is because it's part of me is this, when someone says no, it won't work, my brain goes to, oh, but yeah, but what if it could? And then it has to go to, then though, am I willing to do the work that it takes
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah.
And
And that's probably one of your ADHD strengths, right?
absolutely.
when when somebody says no, you can't do that, the ADHD brain's like, really?
Uh-huh. Absolutely. I was in a meeting
I
last
bet I could find a way.
I was in a meeting last night, right, and I kind of forget this until I actually say the words out loud. I was in a meeting last night where I said, um, this is how having ADHD impacts me. And I used the story of the school because I decided on a Tuesday night but just before Thanksgiving break, because of something that happened in a board meeting. They told me no, and I switched to, but these kids need this. On a Tuesday night, I decided I'm going to start my own school. No clue. No clue. The following day, I went into the school that I was running.
That's that impulse,
Absolutely. So the
that
following day,
impulse control.
and I say to the assistant principal, I'm starting my own school.
Mm.
No clue. A couple, well, that was before Thanksgiving break. We went to Thanksgiving break, came back. We had the few weeks before school starts, before you go for the Christmas break. And I'm starting my own school. I'm going to do this. But then oh man, I don't even know where to start. So before Christmas break, so over the course of 2 weeks, wearing Christmas pajamas, sitting in a recliner, I did everything I needed to do to form a nonprofit, form a board of directors, get everything going. So I went from, I'm going to start my own school, to 7 months later opening the doors for
7 months later.
7 months for the K-12 school.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does that. Nobody in their right mind would do that. And in fact, I was diagnosed because of that. I
Mm.
forever that I had to. My children have ADHD. My husband does. I knew I did, when I went to the psychiatrist and I told her the story, I just remember it was like 10 minutes in, she put her iPad down and she leaned forward and she said, because I picked her also because I didn't want someone who would go straight to medication. She leaned forward and she said, please, please let me medicate you. Please. So So I went ahead and I tried the first medication, and I went back a month later. And medication for me is a great thing. I went back a month later and I said what so many, especially older women, people who are diagnosed late,
Mm-hmm.
say, oh my God, my life would have been so much better. All of this wasted
Mm-hmm.
time, all this stuff. So I went back and I said, oh my gosh, I said, imagine what could have happened if in my 30s I was taking medication. And I said, imagine what the impact that could have made. And she said, no, this never would have happened if you'd been medicated. I said, really? And she said, yeah, you would have paused, you would have stopped, you would have thought, and you would have realized, no, absolutely no. This one is
Sometimes,
possible.
yeah, sometimes, we take the information that we have very, very quickly. We take it in, right? And we just make that decision. And you believe you can do it because you believed you could do a better job and that you could have the school. And thank goodness for that, because now we have this example, right?
You can't just, and that's the piece, that's kind of where we get lost as people with ADHD, is that we make a decision. It sounds great,
Yeah.
but then, our interest goes somewhere else, or it's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. I used to have, during the years that the teachers and school administrators were visiting, there was always, 100% of the time, there was always that sweet young teacher in the group that would say, I want to be like you. I want to have my own school. And I'd say, the hell you do. No, you don't. No, you don't. And I said, the only reason I've been able to pull it off is because first of all, I had the experience necessary and I'm able to sit in every seat. I said, but the other piece is I have this work ethic, this need to work and this drive that's not really healthy. It's not.
Mhm.
It's not really what's best and right. So no, you don't.
Right.
You
We
don't.
don't want to
That's
be the example for overworking
really
and overcommitting. Yes, it gets it done at the end of the day, and everybody's like, amazing, I can't believe you could do this, but at what cost, right? That's a whole nother conversation.
a whole other thing.
That's a conversation. I'm going to have to invite you back
That's a
to have that
whole other thing.
conversation. But that's a big one for people who have ADHD. It's just like, how do we, now that we know how special and out of the box we are and how we think, how do
Yeah.
we use that, but not in a way that is comes at a detrimental cost to our health and our mental health, right? And we as women have to learn how to balance that, especially when we have a superpower. And we
Yeah.
have the superpower is I want to do this thing and then I want to share it with a lot of other people,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't That's not a little thing. You need a lot of special stuff to be able to do that, right?
You do. You have to have, and it has to be accompanied by genuine success. It has to be, going back to kids and what we're doing in schools. Children know that if, they're not doing as much as the others, they're not really doing much of anything, but they're getting high grades.
Yeah.
No, they
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And ultimately I think that undermines the person.
Oh, so much so. And, here's something that I
Hmm.
want to stress the importance for families to, and you do have to go outside of the school system to do this. But here's what really happens is that children who receive special education support, they go through school, they get their grades, and at the end of the day, when they graduate from high school, they walk across the same stage as everyone else. And what I'm referring to at this point is I'm referring to the largest percentage of children that receive special education support in schools are children with milder disabilities and disorders, dyslexia, dysgraphia, reading, writing, math, sorts of things. I'm not referring to students with severe, significant difficulties. So, but in the vast majority of special education, the kids that receive it. So when they walk up, so these are capable children. They walk across that stage, same stage, but 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 12 weeks later, when classmates go off to college or post-secondary training or go into the workplace, they don't have anywhere to go. They have not been prepared to be successful. And so the most important thing that a parent can do is stay on top of progress. Stay on top of, don't sit in those meetings where you're told, yeah, he's doing great. She's doing great. They're making progress, according to their very broad IEPs. You need to know. And for that to happen, you really do have to get those assessments outside of
Yeah.
the school.
This is so important. I'm glad you're bringing it up. Yes, that, as a parent, I am a parent with two children who have IEPs. And what I didn't know the first time around, I made sure I knew the second time around. And understanding for myself that I had to go outside of the school district in my community. I felt like I had to go completely outside of it in order to get the assessments that I needed for my child, because I felt that I was not, it was almost like I was being gaslit.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, this doesn't make sense. And so thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be like when I do evaluations, I do, some are just extremely comprehensive. What I'm talking about is just, it's almost a pre and post assessment. It's our standardized assessments. The things that we use are, so for example, for reading, most of them have versions. So I can administer an oral reading test at the beginning of a school year. And at the end of a school year, I can re-administer the test because I'm using a different version, measuring the same thing, same test, different version. Because what I want to know and what parents need to know is measurable progress being made? And where in all of this, in all of these things that we're going after, it's very prescriptive. What's left as those gaps are closing? Where do we go now?
Mhm.
When I work with kids or people, I say, especially with children, So you and I are going to work together to figure out what you already know and what you're ready to learn next, which needs to be the name of the game. So here's an example. I've got two that I'm about to start working with, both that I did evaluations on. They had a prior diagnosis of dyslexia. So the problem with that is, to say that a person has dyslexia doesn't mean you necessarily know what interventions they need. And so with these two, it was a matter of figuring out where where are the gap, where are the holes, where are they still? Don't go back and revisit, redo everything. It's just, well, how do we quickly plug these things? And it works beautifully. It requires spending the time to to administer. Like, so here's an example. Let's use dyslexia as the example. You can administer even an informal assessment that would take a teacher, a person could do this. You can do it with a whole class at the same time. Part of it, the spelling part of it, and part of it. It's a quick, maybe 15, 20-minute thing to know, okay, this is where the holes still are. This is what we need to go after. But that's not what we do. What we do is every 3 years you can do the evaluation. And then, 3 years later, there's another one. Well, what happens if over the course of 3 years, there's been no progress? What we lost 3 years
Mhm.
versus here's where we are at the beginning of the year. I'm, because I'm a diagnostician, when I had my school and when I ran other people's schools, I was a nut about it. At the beginning of the year, where are we? Halfway through the year, where are we? End of the year, where are we? And all along the way, adjusting. And now with technology, there's so many ways to do this that really we don't have an excuse anymore
Mhm.
not be
Right.
doing this.
Right. It's hard because to know where does it begin? Like, where does this lens shift begin? It begins in the schools as the teachers are being trained, right? But what does
Yeah,
that do for the for the current
yeah,
administrators and teachers
yeah, exactly.
who are still, and a lot of them, and trust me, teachers are amazing. I think that my kids have had great teachers, and I've had really great opportunities to work with them. Um, but people have lots of different experiences. People have a lot of frustrations because we'll meet with our we'll have our IEP meeting, right? We all agree on what needs to be done. The school year starts, and then if you, I always feel like, as if you as a parent aren't calling up and saying, "Hey, where are we with this particular a goal that we set for ourselves? How is it being administered all the time?" It almost feels like it doesn't happen because the teachers they have so many different things on their plates.
Well, I was gonna say that's true. It doesn't happen. When I work with families, when a family hires me, I tell them, I bat at 100%. I guarantee you that if you bring me in as an advocate, you will emerge with a beautiful plan, and it won't happen. And it's and what we don't realize, what parents do get upset, and what we don't realize is that in every classroom, in every school in our country, that classroom teacher is working with a group of kids with about a 3 grade level range. So if it's a sixth grade classroom, in that classroom, the teacher's going to have kids with skills, maybe, well, since the pandemic, she's going to have kids with skills all the way down to maybe first grade
Yes,
and skills above and behavioral difficulties and emotional difficulties and all of this. And what is a person supposed to do? The
hmm,
only thing that you can do is shoot for the middle. You
that's
can't,
right.
they can't go beyond that.
But this brings me to the next question that I have, which is schools, right? So
Mhm.
you have your public school, you have your special education programs within those schools. But when we talk about, let's say, gifted and talented, we need to really understand what that means. Because there's a
Mhm.
lot of kids who are gifted and talented who have a lot of behavioral issues, who have
Yes,
social cues issues, and
absolutely.
we don't look at that. We just look at, oh, look, they're brilliant in this area, but we don't see all the other areas where they may not have things so easy.
Yeah.
And then you have the behavioral schools. And what should people really know when they first of all, the word if behavioral is already a loaded term. I want to think my child needs to go there, but we also need parents to know that there's a difference, that
Mm-hmm.
each child is at a different level of being able to meet the expectation of being, let's say, in a room with a bunch of other kids. Some
Mm-hmm.
kids will do better in a room with just 5 kids.
Right.
Some will do fine if they're in a room with, 20 kids
Mm-hmm.
or 12, but that it shouldn't be stigmatized. That just because you go to this school that is called this behavioral doesn't necessarily, we need to broaden our sense of what that means, what those words mean. And maybe we change it. Maybe we don't call it a behavioral school. Maybe we call it something else.
Mm-hmm.
To
Yeah.
give parents a sense of, okay, what are my real options here? I have a child who is struggling in this area. The school is not required to show growth, but I, as a parent, want to see growth, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm going to all of the, parent counseling things that I need, but we're still not seeing growth. So
Mm-hmm.
now I need to look outside of my public school district. Now what? Because now, am I going to be funded? Am I going to receive funding to send my child to this other school? Do I have to pay for this myself? How much does it cost to send my child to that other school? And are they going to get a Regents diploma when they finish
Mm-hmm.
that school? Like, there's so many things that we have to consider.
Yeah. It's daunting. It is absolutely daunting at best. It's, let's talk about the behavior part first. And so if we begin with basic premise, behavior. Behavior is a form of communication.
Correct.
Bottom line, behavior is a form of communication. So it's a puzzle to be solved. It's when people present in a certain way, in a certain environment, there's always that why? What's what's going on here? What can we do differently? What's happening here? And so the sort of because a lot of my career has been spent working with children and families that have significant emotional behavioral disorders, and there's absolutely is the stigma. There are all these these pieces. Here's the thing though, and why we can no longer look the other way. Since the pandemic, through the pandemic, some of us, some of us as educators we knew what was coming. We saw what was happening, but that wasn't okay to say. And what we knew was coming and what we saw happening and what is now the reality in our schools is that um, we knew that children were going to return to schools with significant emotional, social and emotional difficulties. They couldn't otherwise, we isolated them. And especially when it was critical periods of time. So, for example, when a child goes from elementary school to middle school is where you're developmentally, you're really starting to push those boundaries. And that's important you know, with peers, with adults, important to start doing that. High school, it becomes more important to okay, I know my curfew is midnight, but what happens if I stay out to 12:15? It's just learning how to manage all that. They skipped important developmental stages. The second thing that we did, and schools aren't prepared to help kids with their emotional needs. The second thing, and the huge mistake, in my opinion, that we're making is that children, I mean, they came back. You talk about losing skills and not gaining any skills. You didn't have to have an identified learning disorder to be coming back to school not having skills because they weren't being taught in ways that were best and right. But what we did and what we're doing in our country is, let's say that they were out for a year and a half. It's really about a 2-year window that the education was so sporadic. So, and I'll use a friend as an example. She's a public school 4th grade math teacher. And I remember her calling me. She used to work with me in my school. And I remember her calling me saying, what am I supposed to do? We have these kids. We've been told we have to use 4th grade level curriculum. She knew how to assess because she'd worked with me. And she said, Kathy, she said, the highest one that I have, her skills are about the middle of 1st grade. These children are not ready for the 4th grade level of instruction, but we're told we're not allowed to do anything but that.
Mhm.
And so So what's happened is, if you think about it, we've gone through the period of time where to get into college, SAT, ACT was no longer required. Well, it wasn't being required because too many kids couldn't get a high enough score because they missed those pieces. And now
Mm.
we're seeing that trickle down in that it's not just kids with identified learning disorders. Now it's so many millions of children that we're doing a disservice to. And if we were to adopt the model of meet them where they are, what do you know? What are you ready to learn next? Let's close those gaps. We could be doing it. For the behavioral piece, it's not, nothing is an absolute, but um, more often than not, the type of the services, the care, the things that a child can receive tend to be better in a school that's designed for children with those particular things because um, often there's a more therapeutic model being used. The people that are working in those schools are there because they want to be there versus being a teacher working in a school and you've got this child in your classroom who struggles with behavior and you've been told you have to figure out how to make it work, but they don't have the skill set. And so um, it's so hard because each one is so different. And I
Mhm.
know, there's that aspect of knowing. And this is a period of time. If you're the parent of a child who's struggling behaviorally, that's a situation where you really do need to find someone, an advocate, someone that understands enough to be able to help you navigate those waters to ensure that your child is being treated in a therapeutic way,
Mhm.
education,
Right.
not a punitive
Because our
way.
public schools are definitely not equipped to do that work
It's
at
very difficult.
all.
It's very
And
difficult.
it's not it's I think the child who gets left behind in those in that space until they drop out or
Hmm.
graduate, you know, it's misery,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
So it's really
Yeah,
important that we as a society say, wait, let's relook at this. Let's reimagine it.
let's reimagine it. And
Right?
an
And that
example of
means
listening, yes.
it means reimagining it for ourselves, that school doesn't mean that they go in at, I don't know, if you're going in at six years old,
Mhm.
right, for kindergarten or
Yeah, five,
first
6
grade, that
Yeah.
you go from that early and that they go through this whole period of education, K through 8, and then go through high school, and then when you're done you go to college, and then when you're done and then you work. This is the thing that we keep telling ourselves, and I think that we have to reimagine the way that we educate ourselves and what it means, and when somebody's ready, and how to move forward without all of the stigma. Like you said, society isn't going to bend itself backwards to accommodate you.
No,
That's not it.
no.
But on an individual level, as a parent and with children, you have to be able to make that decision to say, okay, my child is not flourishing in this public school environment. They are really truly struggling. They don't want to go to school anymore. I
Hmm.
this is where I this is where the shift comes in,
Hmm.
right?
It,
Ultimately.
it does. And the way to begin is to realize, behavior is a form of communication. And the thing that we all need, every human being needs to understand why, kind of the why behind what's going on here, normalize it, and so I'm going to go through an example of this. And it's, I did it just before we started this with someone that I work with. And it was working to help him understand that um, you struggle. Yes, you're struggling in this way. Um, it doesn't mean you're a bad person at all. It doesn't.
Yeah. In
And
coaching, we do a lot about the reframe.
coaching, it's reframing it and it's helping them understand, okay, this makes perfect sense. This, and helping them also see that, understand that you are not, you're not alone in this. You're not alone in this. And sometimes sometimes it's 2 steps forward and the next day maybe it's 4 steps back and then the next is, so it's a process. But when a person feels safe, I can share my truth with you and you're not going to think that's not going to mean you're going to not help me. I can share my truth And I can share my truth with you because you are going to support me and guide me. It's the difference between empathy and sympathy. It's the ability to empathize, to understand why this child's presenting the behaviors the way they are. But sympathy, not feeling sorry for them, that does
That does
nothing.
nothing.
But to empathize and say, well, let's figure this out. And I always do it the way that people, I've been called the child whisperer. And in the beginning, I was like that. But you know what? I've had some recent experiences where it's like, I think I'm going to own that. I think I'm going to own that because, but anyways, it was this group of girls that I had great pleasure to spend a week with. And, it was helping them understand this, doing it by saying, I don't know if this could be true for you. It has been true for other people that I know your age or older. Giving examples because I always know, I already know the it. But it doesn't work if you're like, if I was saying to you, you have ADHD and I can tell all this, you. Nobody wants that. What we want to know is, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one because we feel like we are often. And so to be able to say, I don't know if this is true about you, but it has been for them. Could any of that be true about you? Well,
Hmm.
then that's the first time it's okay for that person to say, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's not about them. Yeah,
And they feel heard
they
rather
feel
than
hurt.
like they're
And
being spoken to or spoken
you
at.
shift the strategies the same way. I don't know if this could work for you. It has, that sort of thing. But what's happening, and the point I was making to these middle school girls from an urban school situations, I was saying, here's the whole thing of this is trust and respect are earned, and human beings we're rooted in relationship, and so to be effective, especially with someone who struggles emotionally or behaviorally, there can be nothing um, dishonest, fake about the person doing this. It has to be, here's the thing. These are the reasons why. I mean, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense that you threw that desk across the room. And it makes sense for these reasons. At the same time, got to read the room. That doesn't work. But now that you understand the why, and they know that there's an adult that understands the why, and it is able to then shift them to, so what might you do differently next time? So what it comes down to, the reason I share that is because what it comes down to in education, step number one is about the relationship. And
Yes.
I tell kids that I work with, especially when I was as a principal, I say, here's the thing. Technically, I'm the boss of the school. I have positional power. And adults will tell you, respect your elders, that sort of thing. But that's not how it works. You need to watch me. You need to watch me, listen to me, see if what I'm saying and doing feels right to you. The next step in that process is when I say or do something that doesn't sit well with you, call me out on it. Let's do this. And if over time, if I'm living the way that I am, if you believe that I have earned your trust and your respect, then great. But if we don't have that relationship, who's going to listen to someone that they don't trust? And what student
It
is
goes against
going
nature.
to, absolutely, what student's going to sit in a classroom with a teacher who yells all the time and respond to the teacher that's that teacher when they say, you need to stop talking. You need to watch your tone, lower your voice.
Hmm.
Well,
Right.
but miss,
The
look what you're
model
doing.
is not
The
there.
modeling is critical. And so what I see, unfortunately, what I see more and more in schools is that teachers become disenchanted. It's a very difficult thing. And the hardest thing to do is to go into a school in a situation with teachers who have been working for a long time in education and shift mindset back to um, the students are people first. You need to take the time. You need to be outside your classroom door. You need to spend the time getting to know them because you're wasting your time. A teacher is wasting their time to try to teach anything to students that don't like them. that don't feel safe, that don't
That is
feel no.
true.
So you spend the time on the front end. You don't start your school year. You don't launch into academics the first few days. You're teaching procedures. You're establishing relationships. You're doing all those things. So when I say, excuse me, when I say all of these things that can be done to reimagine schools and shift schools, it doesn't cost money.
Mhm.
It doesn't cost money for you as a teacher to notice something about a child, a student. It just means you have to do it.
Mm.
You have to show the interest. I'm gonna cough. Excuse me. It's not. We can
Yeah,
do it. We can
we
do it.
can. So, Kathy, um, I just I want to ask, what distinction can you make up between the 504 and the IEP?
Okay, that's a great question. So, a 504 plan, Section 504 plan, that's the law. The guidelines are from. Um, oh gosh, I just lost the word.
ADA?
Thank you. Those that comes under ADA. So in many ways, so here's the thing. So
Hmm.
IDEA, special education, there really aren't a lot of teeth in that. It's like you're supposed to do these things, and you can hire an attorney, and you can go through due process. So there aren't a lot of teeth. 504, you actually have more recourse through 504 than you would through the other. So through with a Section 504 plan, if a child is struggling with 504, you can get accommodations for your child. You cannot get modifications. Accommodations mean that you're doing things the child so that the child can access the curriculum instruction as it exists. So you
So,
might,
an example of accommodation is,
so an example of an accommodation could be um, giving them additional time. It can even be, to a certain extent, shortening an assignment, not doing as much, an accommodation, having them sit where it's not quite as distracting for them. That's an accommodation. A modification, you're altering the instruction. And so an accommodation. So let's take a,
so for example, if you asked your teacher to give you the notes, whatever, the presentation from class so that you can have it ahead of time,
that's an accommodation.
that is an accommodation. If I were to say, there's a test coming up, can you please make sure that I get my study guides? I mean, usually I think teachers and professors do give study guides out to everybody, but just making sure that that is something that you
Those
get.
are
That's an
accommodations.
accommodation.
Help you access and benefit from on level curriculum and instruction.
Right.
Accommodation.
Okay.
Modification is that the student doesn't have the ability or the capacity to benefit from the on level instruction. So you're so significantly altering what you're doing that it's no longer sixth grade science. It's really more like third grade science, the instruction. That's a
Hmm.
modification. Modifications can't occur through Section 504.
Only
So
through an IEP, an
it
individualized educational plan.
Yeah, it has to be with special education eligibility and an IEP. And for that, the child has to meet eligibility. States vary a little bit. They have to meet the state's eligibility criteria to receive special education support in that state's schools. And then that's when things like maybe providing a one-on-one assistant,
Mm,
an adult that's with the child all day. That wouldn't be 504. That would be through IEP and
mm.
special education. And
Okay.
so
So I have a
usually,
question.
go ahead.
Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, but usually what schools tend to do is first try to implement when they have a child who's struggling. And the way the process is supposed to work in most states is the child is struggling, so you attempt interventions. If the interventions aren't working, then the next logical step would be 504. A little bit of documentation. You see the struggle. We're going to try these things. But Then for IDEA, for the special ed eligibility, that's where you need the full of the evaluations, the monitoring the IEPs, those sorts of things. And so it's sort of like, we're going to try this first. It doesn't work. We're going to go to 504. 504 is not enough. We're going to go to
Mhm.
education.
Okay. And if you find, let's say you have a child who, you create this plan at the child is meeting all the goals. The parent agrees, the school agrees, the teachers agree. Yes, your child is now successfully meeting this particular, academic goal through XYZ, through all these different measures that you have in place. And so the argument is they've now successfully absorbed this. They don't need that service anymore. Now, what do you say to that? Because I, I want to hear what you have to say before I say anything else.
I will. I deal with that all the time, all the time. And so, here's an example of one that I've dealt with recently. So the fifth grade student with dyslexia had was about to complete the dyslexia program that the state of Texas offers to students. Was going to graduate, because I know I jokingly said, "Well, will there be cake?" Was going to graduate from the dyslexia program, but the student wasn't anywhere close to being able to perform on grade level. They sure weren't.
Mhm.
Nothing wasn't going to work. So the what the school was going to do was, you've graduated from the program, you finished it, and to your point, now you don't need that anymore. Well, you don't need it anymore if you are able to easily demonstrate mastery in all settings. And that's the hope, is that, yeah, you get to the point where you don't need that support anymore. But that doesn't happen as easily as, okay, you mastered these IEP goals, now you're ready to move on. You go back to what I always say is, okay, show me what you know. Now show me what you're ready to learn next. And let's make sure that to learn what you're ready to
I
learn
want to
next.
repeat that. Show me what you know. Now we'll focus on what you're ready to learn next.
Yes, yes. You've
I
shown me
like
what you know.
that.
We'll take a look at what you're ready to learn next. And when we figure out what you're ready to learn next, then we're going to figure out, how is that going to happen for you? And so the
Um,
conversation in the meeting is, this is great. Love hearing you tell me the progress. My child has made this progress. Now let's talk about, what's he or she going to learn next. And based on what you're telling me, he or she is going to ready to learn next, how is that going to happen? Is my child going to just be able to go into the classroom? They don't need any kind of support or anything? Are we sure about that? Or do they still need some sort of support?
hmm,
And when the conversation shifts to what I just said, thank you, school, love this. They've shown what they know. What are they ready to learn next?
hmm.
The support, it, typically, support is not ready to be pulled at the time that they feel that's ready to be pulled. Another example is, if a child, young children who receive speech therapy services through schools, when they finish, when the speech pathologist or speech therapist says, okay, they've mastered all the goals, we're ready to dismiss them from speech, that's what happens. What people aren't realizing, though, is dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, the dys is problem with reading, problem with writing, problem with math. That's rooted in the language center of the brain. So if a child presented with language, expressive or receptive language difficulties, so much so that they needed speech therapy, almost all the time, they're going to struggle with reading. And if you struggle with reading, you're going to struggle with writing. And so, one thing that I would say to families is, if that's your situation, child's received speech therapy, you need to be asking for a full evaluation to look for the possible presence of disabilities in the area of reading, and written expression, and math, because math also manifests in the language portion. And so it's those things. It's knowing to ask for that.
Yes.
Before you ever dismiss my child, before you ever say they're done, okay, show me. Because the thing is, most people, most educators don't know what I just said.
Mhm.
Families sure don't know it.
And the truth is that the chair of that committee, their goal is to just, you know, say, okay, we've checked off this box, we're done, and you know, that's it. They're not really interested in. I don't want to say that they're not interested. That's not fair. I think that a lot of people, if they knew, they would.
Mm-hmm.
Should they be inclined? So I don't. I retract that.
Yeah. No, I do think, but and I'll take what you just said a step further. It's not. It's not a. What you said is true. It's we've got to move kids on, but here's why. The why is because I mentioned earlier that the federal law isn't a funded law, and so here's how this works. So a school district or a school, they get a pot of money, they get a chunk of money that's designated for children that receive special education support. And so let's say that, so I'll use small numbers. Let's say that your school district is allocated $1 million. And with that $1 million, they have to provide special education support to every child that qualifies to receive support. And so what happens is the kids, the larger percentage of kids, those with milder learning difficulties, they don't need as much. But here's what people don't realize. A child who, and this is so politically incorrect, but it's true. If you have a child who has disabilities, is impacted so much that they'll never be able to eat on their own, communicate on their own, function on their own in any way. They're so medically fragile, they'll never be able to. Well, that child is also, according to our laws, they also are entitled to free, appropriate public education. And my question is, so that child can eat up such a high percentage of the funds that the others don't have it. And so what I say is that maybe we need to rethink how we're funding children with significant things, because many of those issues are medical issues, not
Mm-hmm.
educational issues. And so that's also to reimagine education. We have to take a look at what do we call an education? Look at what I mean. Now, education in our country is you are providing healthcare inside the school building. We're doing all these things. We need to rethink that because children do need to be taken care of as far as health goes. Is that really the job of
The
the
school.
school? And so that person who's in charge of that whole special ed program, checking off those boxes, yeah,
Yeah.
that, that
I
eligibility is,
if those services are being offered through the school and you're as you feel like you have to take advantage of those services or else you don't get the other
exactly.
things that you need, then your eligibility for something hinges on and plus they work for the school. So they
Hmm.
work for the special education people.
Hmm.
They're very much, you need somebody outside of that, and I am for giving that money to the parent and saying, here are your choices outside
Hmm.
of this where you can get this service.
Yeah, we have to make
Because therapy, in my experience, the individual who provided the therapy was also talking to the chair of the committee, and there's a conflict,
yes,
massive conflict. And that means that their loyalty is not to the parent and the child and the family and what they need, it is to them making their argument for why the child gets services or doesn't get services in their
yeah,
judgment. And that is a huge problem.
it's a huge problem, and it's one that breaks the hearts of special educators because and I say because I am one, and in a public school situation, you know what's best and right, but you also know you can't say it. Because if you speak up, if I'm a special ed teacher and I know that a child needs something and I speak up and say they need it, school's got to provide it. And so you can't. In fact, let me tell you, here's my truth. The reason I went on to become a diagnostician and then a school administrator was because I was always the voice that spoke up. And so I decided that I was going to make myself so marketable that it didn't matter. If I got fired on a Monday, I could be working by Wednesday because I was going to speak up for what was best and right. And it served me well. It has served me very well. But had I not done that, it would have been a different story because
Yes.
it's not that they
It
don't
is
want to.
such a massive compromise of
I,
your why you come to be a teacher, why you come to do this, and then when you sit in that room and you have to, you know,
yeah,
anyway, that's a whole thing. So,
yeah. There is so much to this.
oh God, yes, we could get into it.
So
Um,
much.
so thank you for just speaking on this topic. Um, what should the public understand about words like gifted and talented, twice exceptional, special educational, behavioral? What
Yeah.
what is the takeaway there? What should people
So,
know?
so the takeaway is, so I'll start with twice exceptional. So, well, actually, to do that, I need to start with gifted and talented. So, gifted and talented is a there's a broad stroke there. It does fall under the umbrella of special educational support. And so, a lot of people, when they hear that term gifted, what they think of is the child has a high intellectual capacity. They very high cognitive ability makes you gifted, and talented is, oh, you must be really good at something. But if they also, people usually in schools usually are thinking, well, okay, they're really really smart, and they can use that intelligence to create robots and
Hmm.
different things. Talented. Well, here's the thing. So gifted and talented, it is those things. It is a higher cognitive ability or capacity to learn. Talent is all sorts of things, ability
It
to do
is.
so.
It's all sorts of things.
And so a true gifted and talented program is one that first and foremost, most of the time, a majority of the time, the higher the level of cognitive ability, the more awkward. So like I always tell people, I don't like to see super high IQ scores or cognitive scores when I'm testing someone because it's almost always offset by social, emotional, or psychiatric difficulty when you start getting up into those
Yeah.
ranges. Definitely social, definitely social. And so they're quirky. So these are quirky kids. These are
Mhm.
quirky people.
Of course,
And
twice exceptional. Yes.
yes. And so a twice exceptional person is someone who has an identified learning disability and they have this capacity to do these great things.
Yeah.
It's true. And I can say this because I have a good friend who has, she started a school for gifted and talented students. And it's exactly what it truly is. It's kids that are, you know, the talent may be in the fine arts. The talent may be in the ability to interact with others and do things.
Hmm.
It's true. And it's understanding that that quirkiness is what makes them who they are. And so a lot of teachers really struggle with that, especially teachers of kids that are gifted, have been identified as gifted and talented because
Hmm.
the belief is these are the kids that are going to sit down, they're going to do all the work, and they're going to excel in college, and they're going to, that's not who these people are.
No, they push back. They got questions.
They're lovely people. The, the behavioral piece just depends on, it could be, so as far as behavioral, if students identified as qualified for support with behavioral difficulties, it could be anxiety, it could be depression, it could be
Hmm.
out, it can be so many different things. And so it's, if it's so much of the time people who um, would meet criteria to be people who have autism, to be falling in under that spectrum that autism is, are treated as though they're people with behavioral disorders or behavioral difficulties, when in fact it's that they don't understand the complexity
Yes.
of the situation. And as far as the link between ADHD and autism, it's the normal natural progression as far as children being identified and what label or what diagnosis they're given is that young children that receive an autism diagnosis are children that have complex, significant difficulty with autism. It's easy to identify them. It's easy to diagnose them. Children who are going to fall into a milder range of autism, their first diagnosis is almost always ADHD.
Hmm.
It's not ADHD; it's sensory processing
Hmm.
disorder, and it's
Yes.
not those. It may be sensory processing and expressive
Hmm.
language disorder. All of
Yes.
those things go until you come across someone that says, "Wait a minute, I think there may be some features of autism here. I mean, this may be co-occurring." And so there really isn't any such thing as just ADHD.
No. Yeah.
It's
I always
co-occurring.
understood when we first were diagnosed about it is that ADHD is like a curtain, and behind it is everything else. And then there's the autism, and then there's all this other
All of
stuff,
these things, all of these things,
all
and
of the
it's
things.
yeah.
And understanding that it's a sensory thing because is important because when as parents when we have our infants, a lot of it's everything that they the way they process the world is sensory at that point, right? And it's
Mhm,
us as parents who have to kind of be able to interpret that. But what we see is what we as a society are conditioned to see that as a behavior
mhm.
and not that they are
Yeah,
communicating something about how their senses are perceiving their environment.
that's it. The behavior is the manifestation of the
Right.
difficult, and then at the same time, it's huge. The caution is,
Hmm.
um, let's stick with the sensory issue. Let's go with let's say that it's sound. And so there are some children that are so their sensory issues are such that you'll see them wearing big noise canceling headphones. Um, and so my stance on that is as an initial intervention, yes. At the same time, what the world sees when you wear big red noise canceling headphones, what the world is seeing is, oh, there must be something wrong here.
Hmm.
The other piece of it is if they're really strong noise canceling, it's not providing the child with an opportunity to begin being a bit desensitized. And and so the goal is with any sensory issue, the goal is to acknowledge it, figure out what to do about it, and
Hmm.
then figure out how do you shift it so that it doesn't it's not going to impede or impair opportunities for experiences.
Hmm.
And so but it can be, as you know, it can be as simple as a sensory issue where I can't stand the way that if I'm wearing a uniform, school uniform, and they got the
Hmm.
monitor on it, and I can feel that embroidery.
Yeah. Or the
And,
tag.
yeah, and so, but my cautionary thing to parents is do not, under any circumstances, insist that the school not make your child wear that uniform. They'll have jobs where they have to. Instead,
Hmm.
you take whatever the child can tolerate, the shirt that they do tolerate, and that goes underneath the
Hmm.
uniform. And
Right.
so you've got to, as a parent, you've got to be very careful about, I call it making excuses. You've got to be
Hmm.
careful about um, keeping your child, we don't use that word handicap anymore, but this is where I do use it. It's don't don't limit them. Don't,
Yes.
you know,
There is a balance. It's it's self-awareness,
hmm
okay, and then education, but it has to be balanced
yeah,
because
got to
like you
balance.
said, then you start to tip into now we're modifying everything to accommodate the child who is not able to meet the expectation, and then there is chaos.
Yeah. Educationally, how are we going to move them forward? This is where
Hmm.
they are today, and this is what you need to provide today. What are we going to start pulling tomorrow? How are we
Hmm.
going to strengthen? What are we going to
Yeah.
do here?
Yeah.
And so,
There are a lot of really should people be open to them, there's a lot of really great like parent coaching um, uh, workshops for what is it called? Parent training.
So fun.
That I highly recommend them because if what a person is, if you are open to it, you can really learn a lot about communication, and it helps you to identify what your triggers are now and what are some of the things that you're getting caught up in that you may not be aware of. So I highly recommend parent training programs
I
and
love
parent coaching because it really helps a lot. And
this.
it gets you out of it again. It lets you know that this is something that has been studied. Other people have gone through it. You are not alone, right? You are
Exactly.
using your resources. You know, this is the best thing you can do rather than listening to your parents who are telling you you should just do this. This is what we did with you,
Yeah.
and giving you all this kind of bad advice. And you're like, but you have this child who is, a little bit extra. And
Yeah.
you have to say, you know what, thank you for your advice. I hear that, but I have to figure out what's going to work for me and my family, and,
Yes.
and
And when
having the courage to do that. So I highly recommend all that stuff.
the first thing that happens when I do parent training, parent coaching, the very first thing that happens the very first day is that for the first time in many people's lives, that's their first opportunity to be sitting with other people and discovering you're not alone.
No.
You're not
And it's
being
not
judged.
just a family quirk. It's not just a family quirk in your particular family. No, this is a quirk that exists in a lot of families
And when I learned that,
across all over the world. It's not just special to you.
no, no. And the thing that's so important, I
And it's
discovered,
trauma. A lot of it is trauma.
absolutely it is. Think about it. When you're pregnant and you're going to have this baby, and then you end up with the baby that was not the baby you planned on,
Nope.
what are you supposed to do? And then I've discovered two things. One is, this is a phenomenon. Fathers, so if it's a firstborn son, one of the most important things for the father to experience is dads need an opportunity to be sitting with other fathers while they're watching their children play with one another. It's just this shift. I've seen it year after year after year when I would set these things up because for the first time in those dads' experience, what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, because men don't necessarily like to share emotion and as easily as women may. What they're seeing for the first time is, first of all, their child. There are actually other kids playing with their child, and maybe the football team you wanted them on wasn't the right thing for them, but it doesn't mean your child isn't a great kid.
Right.
And then I facilitate the conversations, and then it's for mothers to discover that you said it too, the resources. You know what, you guys, it's not just when we're together talking. You guys can go have coffee. You can do this, and it's the first time for, in my experience, that they can actually breathe, and it's where the hope starts.
Yes.
It's the first time for a lot of parents I meet where they realize, oh, I can breathe. I can breathe. And some days, because I experienced this myself too, raising my difficult son who turned 40 yesterday,
Happy birthday.
there were moments where I would either be teaching kids or I would be in a group situation. I had moments where I would be looking around going, well, it could be worse.
Mm.
It's bad, but it could be worse based
Yeah.
on what I was seeing. And that would be a brief thing that for whatever reason in that moment, I'd be like, okay. But most importantly, you have to find your people. You
Yes.
have to find the people that understand. And your children need opportunities to be with their people too, people that accept them and play with them. But
Yes.
we don't set those opportunities up as often as we probably need to. There are cultural issues. There are cultural,
Yes.
in some cultures, it's not acceptable to have a child that struggles. It's not, so it's also acknowledging that
Yes.
and helping families understand it's okay. It's okay. It really is going to be okay. Um, it's also going to be a lot of work. It's
All right. Kathy, what do you see as working? What do you think is working now? What are some things that you're in education and in the field that you're in? What are some things that you're like you're happy to see kind of changing?
Yeah, I am happy to see that at least we're giving voice to the fact that our kids are struggling emotionally and that we've got to do something else. I'm happy to see that there's been a shift, an awareness and a shift to preparing students for life after high school when it comes to vocational training, that sort of thing. We at one point we shifted to no, everybody's going to college. That's everybody's got to be college ready. No, that's not what's best and right, and that's not what people want. So I have been, at least in Texas, I haven't paid attention to what's going on other places. I love that shift back
Hmm.
to
Yeah,
um, um, things I like. I really do have to think when it comes to this.
things
Things
you're hopeful for.
not good. Things I'm hopeful for are much easier. The
All right,
things
let's
that
go
I'm
for hopeful.
super hopeful. So I'm hopeful that um, I'm hopeful that people. Number one, the thing that I'm hopeful for is that sooner rather than later, our profession will be treated like a profession. And I say that because, and I challenge you to do this. A lot of times when we're in situations where we're meeting new people and you'll say, oh, what do you do? Well, what do you do means what kind of job do you have? If you come across a teacher, they are not going to look you in the eye. If you
Mm,
come across a doctor, a lawyer, they'll look at you and they'll say, oh, I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. That they're proud, they're tall. When you meet a teacher will say, well, I'm just a teacher.
mm,
Right. Teacher. That we don't carry ourselves that way. We don't. It's because our profession is not treated like a profession. We're not paid equal to our education. An educator, a teacher, we can't stop learning. We have to continue. And so I hope that we get to the point where our profession is treated like a profession. For that to happen, though, we have to behave as professional
mm,
educators. We have to constantly strive to improve. I hope that we I hope that we can convince educators, teachers, educators, school administrators to understand that um, to be good, to reach people, you have to be therapeutic in your approach. You don't have to be a therapist. You have to be therapeutic. You have to be aware of, so self aware that you know your triggers, you know your strengths, you know those things, you know how to manage those things um, so that you can be therapeutic, understand
mhm.
those things. If we could switch
We
mindset,
need to, that's raising ourselves as a society to our mental wellness, a rededication to our mental wellness. You mentioned it. Each individual is responsible and elevating it, prioritizing it so that when you get to that job, you're as a teacher,
yeah,
you know, that you are coming from a place of, you know, being grounded.
yes, yes. And as we well know, that can be done. That has to be a conscious decision. It's not as simple as I'm a teacher. I go into my classroom and I'm going to start my lesson, and we're doing this, and that. That doesn't work anymore.
Nope.
That doesn't work. And so that has to be the shift. I'm hopeful that the huge problem we have right now is that people are leaving the profession faster than we've ever seen. In the history of education in our country, we've never seen people quitting and leaving in the numbers they are.
One of my
And
questions,
and we don't have people in the pipeline.
yeah, one of my questions for you was, after all these years, how and all these people who are now just leaving the profession, what makes you stay?
Oh my goodness, I love a challenge. I stay
Because
because
you have ADHD and you love a challenge.
no, I stay because I believe that all of this experience I have, all of these things that I've learned, I believe that it's I am walking the journey I'm walking because I'm supposed to. this is what I'm supposed to do. And because it's like I I personally I get such great satisfaction and motivation when I can go into a situation where people are thinking, we can't do this. We can't work with this kid. We can't do this. We can't do that. And to be able to, just with some questions and maybe showing a few ways of doing things, to shift to we can. Because here's the thing. I decided a long time ago, um, education in our country has been broken for a long time, for a long time. And I used to say, there's the perfect storm is brewing. I'm telling you, people, the perfect storm is brewing, never thinking about a pandemic. Perfect storm is brewing. And then the pandemic showed up, and I said, that perfect storm has become a tsunami.
Mm-hmm.
I can be like so many people, especially teachers and school administrators. I can be like so many people say, it's broken. There's nothing we can do. It's broken. Or I can be the voice. I can be the person that does
I
what
find that acceptable. I don't like that when I'm in a room full of people saying it can't be done. I'm
yeah.
literally like, I need to get away from this group.
And
It's not my group.
I'm the one that says, well, help me understand that. I'm curious. I have a curious question. Why do you say that?
Yeah,
What?
no, it's important. I do feel that I find that call too is just that sense of um once you start that those words start circulating amongst a group, and it's like they start speak it's like speaking to the choir, and you have to pull yourself out of that in order to be able to come up
Yeah.
with the other.
It's well, and I've lived the devastation of that because of what the pandemic has done to educators.
Mm,
And so for myself, having a school, it was my sole responsibility to keep all of the students safe, their families safe, the staff safe. And by safe, that wasn't just making sure the school was sanitized and this. It was the bulk of what was going on was emotional work, the struggle and all of that. So much so that for me, for my school, for a little over 2 years, I would go into my school around 7 in the morning and I'd go home around 1 in the morning, 7 days a week. There was one 7 day break in there. I took one break, no break. Over 2 years carrying that on my shoulders, not realizing what it was, the toll it was taking on
yes.
me. Did all that. And it took one man 20 minutes to take it all away from me. And it was a manifestation of all that, because what happened was I'd had enough, and I stood up and I said, I've had enough. I
Mm,
have no confidence that you can help guide this program, blah, blah, blah. So I share that to say that in the beginning of the pandemic, teachers um, we were championed. It's like, you're taking care of my child. And then all the kids got sent home. And we were all struggling with that. And so then teachers were vilified. What do you mean they can't come to the school? They need to be in school. They need to, COVID's not real. And so at the very time that the problem that teachers were having was, I need to keep myself safe. I need to keep my child safe. And at the same time, I'm being forced to have 20, 30 kids in my classroom that may or may not be carrying COVID.
mhm.
So, so yeah, it broke. It broke a lot of people, a whole lot of people, and
Yeah.
those who
It,
didn't
it
break,
to me the pandemic, in education, it was a shit show,
mhm,
but it revealed a lot of things.
it revealed
It
so
took the film right off. It was
much.
like, oh, that's what's been under here. Y'all don't know what you're doing? Well, thank you. I thought
Yeah,
it was just me. Apparently, none of us actually know what we're doing. The whole thing's broken, and I need to make my own machine. Thank you. I'm off. It was revealing.
it was revealing. And for those of us that are always looking for what's the lesson here, a lot of good came of it. A
Oh
lot of
yes,
something as simple as what you and I are doing right now, the interacting with people virtually and having these conversations and learning in this way. And it opened the world in a lot of ways. So it's blessing and a curse all wrapped up.
absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. But unless we change, unless we reimagine our schools and what we're doing, those teachers that walked out the door, they're never walking back in the door.
Hmm.
And unless we reimagine it, we're not going to get people. We're not going to get people coming through that pipeline wanting to
Hmm.
become teachers. Because right now, today, even I, with all I know and all of my skills, I don't see myself walking back into a, like, it would be very difficult to get me to go back into a public school in our country
Hmm.
as an administrator and do the job because, and only because their hands are so tied that the things that they know need to be done and things that we all know are best and right can't be done. Our hands are tied. And so it's not just reimagining education at the school level, it's reimagining education as a country.
Hmm.
What do we want it to be? And then when we find the people, that are really good at it and they have the answers, let's attract them the same way that we attract other industry attracts people and keeps people. Take care of them.
Hmm.
Take care of them. And so it's
I'm all for that. And you know what? That's a great question. Take care of them. How do you care for yourself, Kathy? How do you show up for yourself?
so I had to learn how to because I will be 65 the first of September 1. I'll be 65 years old. And I don't know what that's supposed to feel like. I don't feel like it. But what I realized though with the whole process of the school, losing the school and all that, what I came to discover was, wait a minute. I have gone for 30 something years spending so much of my time caring for other people's children and other people, I lost myself in that mix. And so I started doing what I preach, which is take the time for yourself. I created a business. The work that I do now is on my terms. I take the time. If I want to spend time with my granddaughter, I spend time with my granddaughter. If I want to, I take the time. And taking the time is things like, for me, something that was very healing is being outside. I like to work
Yeah, you and
hard.
I,
And
we talk
so
about that all the time. We're big
gardening,
nature and pets.
yeah, absolutely. And I've discovered how healing that is. And so it's making the time and it's being okay. I had to learn how to be okay with stillness, because with ADHD, I thrive in chaos.
Right?
And but that's not
No, it
healthy.
isn't.
That's not.
It's finding the pause and making
Mhm.
room for it, and letting it grow over time, because that's the thing. We have a hard time being with ourselves and being still and having that be
Mhm.
enough.
Yeah.
Nothing
Yeah.
else has to be happening, just this. This is enough.
Yep. And you know what it was for me? It was the realization, and I know I've shared this with you, it was the realization one day I was sitting there thinking, and I realized, wait a minute, I have had the great fortune to impact generations I'll never meet. My work, the thing that I do is glorious. And then realize when I was able to realize that, I was able to let go of this constant, this hunger. I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. I'm not reaching enough people. To realize I'm reaching the people I'm supposed to. I'm reaching the people I can.
Yes.
And that's for now, today. Tomorrow might be a different story. For now, today, that has to be good enough for me today. Um, who knows what tomorrow will bring? Maybe I'll decide, nope, I'm playing small. It's time for me to quit playing small, and I need to do more. But it's knowing that I have a choice. I've taken the time to really, truly discover who I
Yeah,
am and
that is true
listen to it.
freedom. I was talking to a
Mm-hmm.
friend, very wise man, and we were talking about what true freedom is having the time and being able to do what you want with the time that you have, the
Yep,
freedom to do that.
exactly. And we don't realize that we're so caught up in everything that we don't realize that. And the other thing that came along with it when I realized I was going to be 65 was, you know what? I'm not going to become the little old lady. I'm not going to become invisible and just,
Oh
fade
no.
away. And so it was also physical work. It was also taking care of my body
Yes.
and all of the things that I had been neglecting and just, and lo and behold, the people that say, nutrition's important and taking care of your body's important, it
It
really
really
is.
is. They were
Who knew it? It worked. They were right.
yeah, 100%
They were right.
right. And
Yeah.
yes, I think taking care of our body, taking care of our vessel, what we put in it, what we consume, not just in our mouths, but through our eyes, through our ears, what the energy that we
Mhm.
consume, right? Being mindful of these things and putting boundaries around it and being intentional about how we use our time while we are here. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Yep.
It has
Thank
been an
you.
absolute pleasure talking to you for
I know.
over an hour.
No,
Kathy,
it's too.
excuse me. Before we go, where can people find you, Kathy?
So you can find me a couple places. So I've also started a business, Reimagining Your Life. So you can find me if you just Google reimaginingyourlife.org. You can find me that way. Reimaginingeducation.us. You can find me that way. Those are two of the easiest ways to find me.